Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Michael Siggins, and I am the founder of the Channel Pro Network. So glad you can spend some time with us here today. The Channel Pro Network includes websites, events, and a magazine for managed service providers and technology integrators. Our mission here at Channel Pro is really a very simple one. It's to provide you with the information, insights, and resources that you need to run a more successful business. Today's webinar is a perfect example of the info that can help your business. Our topic today is Microsoft Fabric, an all-in-one analytics solution, and with essential insights for CSP resellers. And it's presented by our friends at TD SYNNEX. With me today, I've got special guests, Mike Morrison and Tony Ferrara. They're both pre-sales solutions architects at TD SYNNEX. Before I pass the mic over to them, just a couple of quick housekeeping items, excuse me. Please get involved. We always encourage your feedback and questions because it makes for a better experience for everybody during a presentation. If you've got any questions for us or insights, please use the Q&A area at the bottom of the window for that. That's the best place for those. And we will follow up tomorrow with additional information and a link to the recording. All right, now I'm going to turn things over to Mike. Mike Morrison, thanks for being here, sir. Please take it away.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and welcome everyone. So I don't need to introduce myself. Michael did a good job on that, and I've got my counterpart Tony Ferrara on the chat with us as well, and he'll be handling any questions and stuff that come up. And if I misspoke or misspeak, hopefully he'll come in and interject and correct me where I'm wrong. Microsoft Fabric, as you may or may not know, was launched about a year and a half ago. In Microsoft, much like on their AI side, Microsoft is continuously updating this and adding more and more features, which is good news for the end users. I'm going to start with a simple quote from Satya Nadella when Microsoft initially announced Fabric at 2023. One of the biggest product launches they've had in the data analysis and data management side. I mean, there's all the co-pilots, everyone's aware of those, and some of the security aspects and tool sets Microsoft has launched. But from a data manipulation, a data tool set point of view, Fabric was a big launch for Microsoft. Okay. And if you don't know, if you have customers on Power BI premium capacity, many of you may have seen this when they're going to renew it, the licenses are no longer renewable. These are all the Power BI P1 SKUs, which is typically the $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 per year, yearly commit price licenses. Those are being all transitioned to Fabric licensing. So you may have seen this, right? And so we're seeing at TD SYNNEX, we're seeing a lot of customers coming to Fabric because they weren't aware of the licensing change for one reason or another. They either turned off their management Power Platform, Power BI management notification tools, or ignored them. So Microsoft's been announcing that through those channels for a while, plus on the web. And all the existing Power BI P1 capacities were retroactively sort of updated with the capacities for Fabric over a year ago. So customers have already been using and seeing some of these Fabric tool sets. They just had that P1 licenses, and those are being end of life and will be needed to be replaced with a Fabric license. And you know, you can reach out to us, you can reach out to whoever. And the transition from a Power BI premium license, which was a modern work SKU, will be going to an Azure SKU. The price for a P1 versus a Fabric Azure SKU is relatively like $7 difference, but you get a whole bunch of extra capacity. And I kind of wanted to highlight that because if you're in the MSP space, this is where, if your customers aren't asking you specifically about Fabric, this is where they'll be discovering that they kind of need to go to it, is if they have these P1 capacities. So a lot of business coming in from that transition now, and a lot of questions they have about it. And you know, and whoever you go to, whether it's us, you know, TD SYNNEX or Microsoft, you know, there's plenty of answers to be had. right? And that's one of the things that with TD SYNNEX is we provide some of those answers without you having to wait in a queue for who knows how long if you go into Microsoft. So on to the meat and potatoes. In the world of AI, as you may know, and actually even in the world where you're working with business intelligence and providing dashboards on KPIs or whatever, fundamentally, your results is only as good as the data sets that you have. So it's kind of important that as you're developing these data sets, that you make sure that you're not bringing any garbage in, because if you do, you're going to get garbage out. And with AI or with business intelligence reports, like Fabric provides or Power BI provides, it's important to, normalize your data, clean it, making sure you don't have, just bad stuff or improperly matched up stuff in there, because your results will not be as expected and could be really, really wrong, right? AI hallucinates. Power BI doesn't tell you how many, how your sales is going correctly if you don't feed it all the correct data set and structure it correctly. So kind of make sure that your data is as good as possible. And it's also relevant for Microsoft Fabric, because Microsoft Fabric also incorporates a number of AI tool sets that you can use for both using AI to manage your data, as far as like assembling it and flowing it together into common data sets that you can use to do the presentations at the Power BI level. But we also have a bunch of service stacks in there from, data movement, where how do I get my data into the tenant space from, anywhere in the Microsoft world, anywhere in any other cloud provider or on-premise, government entities, wherever the data is, we have tool sets besides just the Power BI data movement processes that existed. Now we have extra ways to move data into Fabric, and we also have AI tools attached to all these different things that allow the user operator that's running the different tool sets in Microsoft Fabric to use AI in the creation of data lakes or in the creation of data ingestion and data integration, right? And then we have the ability to run Spark notebooks in the data science field, so we can like run AI on the data and then use that to combine data sets and results, and then feed those into a dashboard that then we're then going to push off into our analytics stack and provide some intelligence reports on the back end of it. And I just wanted to let everyone know, in case it wasn't clear to begin with, we do have a chat going on, and we'll have some questions on there and stuff. If when those come up, answer any polls and stuff like that. If you have any questions on this stuff as I'm going through it, please let the moderator know, and we'll probably try to address those as we can. So what is Microsoft Fabric? This is kind of like a agenda. What we're going to talk about is, what is Microsoft Fabric? What does it look like? What kind of issues can we solve with this? How AI works with it? How many govern the whole stack? And we're going to get down at the end to licensing and pricing, and then how we're going to get started if a customer is interested in this, or if they're transitioning from legacy Power BI premium capacity licenses. So what inspired Microsoft Fabric? This is a question. I did a co-presentation with Microsoft, over a year or so ago, when this had first come out. And so having that opportunity to talk to the product manager for Fabric at Microsoft, I said, well, what actually brought Microsoft to come and come out with a tool like Fabric? And they had a bunch of point products and stuff that inspired sort of like the Fabric SaaS service. He provided some things. He actually injected it into the co-presentation we did. And part of his thing was to show this was the ML, AI, and data landscape back 2 years ago. And Microsoft was looking at this, and Microsoft customers were looking at this, and it's just nuts, right? On all the different types of infrastructures, API sets, the analytics tools, the different database systems and everything. There's a whole lot of complexity in there. There's a whole lot of different stuff that customers can leverage and sort of like, pipe together, wire together, however you want to call it, to bring in all the data, manipulate it, and present it out so people can make business decisions on the data that's being brought into their environment. So just a big old mess. And then Microsoft internally also looked at what tools they had for doing these kind of things too. So just in the Microsoft point of view, we had Power BI, we had Purview, we had Data Factory, Synapse Data Warehouses, used to be SQL Data Warehouses, right? So Synapse Stack and the Synapse Spark stuff, which is a language for, running notebooks on data sets and manipulating it through that. Again, all of these were individual and still are individual point products that one would have to deploy through different varying processes, some on Azure, some through Microsoft Modern Work. And then also, even sticking into those particular spaces of just the tools that Microsoft has, there's a lot of configuration and a lot of management of those individual pieces that people have to have someone assigned to allow the stuff to stay performant and keep cost management low, right? And so that was a continual process for someone in the organization to manage the back end while we have other people, data scientists and data analysts, running on the front end, right? They're creating Power BI dashboards, they're doing et cetera, et cetera. So Microsoft decided that their goal was going to be a leader in data virtualization and analysis. And so where they were looking at keeping everything together into one space, right? And so they decided we're going to unify everything within the Microsoft world. We're going to put some AI capabilities on top of it so I can run AI to do the creation of the tools. So it makes it easier for people that aren't necessarily trained in data scientists processes, right? Are people that are not really necessarily fully trained on all the intricacies of doing Power BI. So we're going to give them a co-pilot for doing those tools. If you've run Microsoft 365 Copilot, you can look at an email and ask Copilot, hey, kind of summarize this and tell me what I can do. Likewise, we have a Copilot in Microsoft Fabric for creating Power BI dashboards. Hey, create a chart that shows me my sales month over month, and then you show me all the sales where they're negative from the month before in red, right? And so we create bar charts and do all this stuff. So we can talk to the Microsoft stack as a developer in it using natural language and a chat GPT style interface. We just ask it to do something for it, and it'll create the elements that we need to deploy to our end users. And all of that came into what we had with Microsoft Fabric. So we have from left and right, and I clustered the blue tagged elements together because those together make up the four products that would be the Synapse Data Analytics stack, right? So we get from the left, Data Factory, which is an ETL tool. It came directly out of Azure Data Factory, but now instead of having to deploy that in Azure and manage that, like I mentioned before, where I have to control that and have someone watch that, it's paid for under a single SaaS SKU for Microsoft Fabric. And I'll get to the pricing here later. But essentially, Microsoft Stack comes out to roughly $256 per month for a tenant license that gives you all these capabilities. If you want to do a reservation on that, it comes out to about less than $180 a month. And for that, you'll get Azure Data Factory deployed into your tenant. You'll get the Synapse Data Engineering. You get a Synapse Data Science, which allows me to run, notebooks and stuff, et cetera. Synapse Data Warehousing, which allows me to give like a SQL Data Warehouse. real-time analytics. So I got a real-time analytics dashboards I can deploy into the Fabric stack and feed it IoT data, feed it whatever kind of data that is very rapidly occurring. I can feed it in there, then I can see a live real-time dashboard on that, which I then, see my mouse is working, can push off to Power BI dashboard. And an extra bonus thing that didn't exist before Fabric was the data factory. Data factory allows me to look at my data sets as they're coming in, or look at combinations of different data sets at any particular time and notify me if some conditions I define are triggered, right? So maybe I have a quote for some products and it hasn't closed yet, but my inventory in the warehouse is kind of low. I can trigger that to do a buy for that particular product because the probability of closing the sale on that is high. So I know I probably want to have some kind of, pre-order in case there, so I can cover that and then deliver that product. And just an example of that. So Fabric encompasses all these SaaS products. One that's not on here, which is just recently announced, was I can also now deploy Azure SQL databases into Fabric and pay for them with that Fabric single monthly SKU price that I purchase. And that's your fixed price for the month. And I have the AI across the whole thing. Everything besides the Power BI data sets that if I'm coming in standard BI mode, all of that data for all these different processes resides in a lakehouse architecture called OneLake. So all these tools can interface with each other and interface with the data from OneLake, from all the different OneLake spaces that you have. There's one lakehouse architecture, or there's one OneLake, but multiple lake houses you can deploy to the lake house, so you can do segregation of the data sets on there and restrict certain people from seeing certain information, or restrict certain tools from doing it. And underlying that, or across the board on all that, we also have Microsoft Purview. Microsoft Purview allows you to set enterprise roles on the sets of data on whether or not, who can see it and whether any of it can be exfiltrated out to the tenant. Anything that comes in via Data Factory on the left can be tagged with Purview, and the sets of data and the rows of data that are tagged from Purview, even if they're merged with data from other sets that are not tagged, there's specific data elements that are tagged under Purview, maintain that through the whole stacks, right? So we're introducing this security controls across the whole stuff, and Purview is by default enabled with the Microsoft tenant, and also integrates with the rest of the Purview if you're running that in your tenant space, so we can control all that together and set rules on data access and lifetime access to the data. So Microsoft Fabric, did I see it? I saw a chat message. Okay, I didn't see it. It's gone. Microsoft Fabric allows us to provide a single capacity. So this is the SKUs that we provide, right? The SKU you pick defines the amount of capacity units that are available for all the different tool sets in Fabric. And that then defines how much you can do. So obviously, if you've got tens of thousands of users hitting dashboards and pulling in lots and lots of records, the F2 SKU may not be able to work. So we can step up on there, and we can go up and down on the SKU side to figure out what SKU I should have. So capacity units is essentially an amalgamation of CPU and memory, and how much is assigned to it's available for the month for your capacity, the SKU that you purchase. And so we talk about OneLake. So there's multiple things on Fabric. So we're going to get into OneLake. OneLake allows us to have multiple workspaces similar to Power BI workspaces. And we can do mirroring into Amazon style S2 buckets. So Snowflake, Amazon, any other tool set. The S2 storage format is popular with a lot of third-party tools, where you got more mirroring, different types of mirroring coming with that, including mirroring for Dataverse and other stuff. And we can, of course, obviously look at Azure storage locations. And that allows us to mirror that or migrate that, your choice, into the lake houses. And then we can apply the Fabric elements that we want to apply to those data sets as we go through it. And then again, management, unified management and governance across all the workspaces, and the purview applies for all that as well. So now we'll go look at Data Factory. And Data Factory is an ingestion tool. Time here, good on time. A lot of transformations available. So transformations are and access to different things is what can we do with the data sets, right? So, and how do we work with it? And if you're familiar with Power BI or Power Query, the Power Query resides on Power BI, Excel, a few of the other Microsoft stacks. Similar kind of thing is like, well, we connected some data sets, we manipulate those, we merge different data sets across, and we add different data sets. Now we've merged them, we add other data sets, and that gives us a final result, right? Of, in this case, our top customers. So that's what we want. Maybe that's what we want to present on, right? We're looking for filtered data, and we're bringing in all kinds of data sets, and sometimes the stuff has to be, separate things have to be manipulated and matched up together first before we add this tertiary set of data to then apply to that. So we do all these through transformations in Power Query, or we can use Spark notebooks too. So multiple choices of different ways to manipulate the data. This just happens to be covering Power Query. The pipelines allow us to do things like, bring in data, do a transformation of it. And so we orchestrate the capability, the different capabilities we need in Power Query when we're merging and doing all this stuff. And then if I can set a pipeline to orchestrate those tools, and the first thing I'm going to do is copy some data in. Then I'm going to call Power Query to merge these different sets of data in here. I might have 2 copies on here, and then I merge them, and then I push them off to some other data set. And right now we're doing something else. So this controls our jobs. And rather than doing it all one big old fell sweep, where we're doing all this once in one single tool, we're able to do this. And this then allows us to break down the steps, and then that allows us to make it easier to see just the one particular element at a time. I'm going to do this, and the next thing I'm going to do that, and the next thing I'm going to do that. So if something fails or something doesn't come out right, maybe you set the values wrong, right? Maybe you applied a translation from one thing to another wrong in this one, and then we can go back and address that later, right? And it also allows us to do, pipelines also allow us to do things like, go implement a medallion architecture where we bring in data in initially and doing some basic level manipulation of that data, and we'd go that into a medallion architecture. We'd call that the bronze level. And then once we've got that initial stuff done, then we move it to another lake house area when we would call it a silver architecture, and we're adding more and more fine tuning on that. And then we'll migrate that from there to a gold architecture. And medallion architecture has been in existence in a long time, and Microsoft recommends that kind of stuff, but there is no hard, fast rules, and you don't have to do that. It just, that segregation of the steps, and it makes it easier to look at things in an individual atomic level of different translations and all the different stuff you're doing, rather than having, like I said, have it all occur in one fell swoop, and then trying to figure out what went wrong, or what someone did wrong because they did this and that and they should have done the other thing, right? And they have to like parse through a whole lot of set of stuff that's happening. So now we'll talk about the highlighted area, the Synapse Data Engineering, the Azure Synapse Analytics stack, right? And then how that's segregated and how that's presented into the Microsoft Fabric. So Fabric Synapse provided data engineering, data science, which is the Spark Jobs, AI machine learning models to work on the data. We could have SQL data warehouses. We could do some real-time analytics in there as well, and do the streaming data set. And again, all of these would have been individually deployed processes that we would spin up in Azure, and we'd size them accordingly. We'd size them based on the work we're doing. And if the work we're doing wasn't sufficient or had to be managed, we would have to have someone that was really deep in Azure to go down and right size these and maintain those spaces and make sure, that we know how to grow them, right? If a data warehouse overflows, what do we have to do? We have to go into the SQL data warehouse and make it, grow it bigger, and someone has to go in and then do that, and then come back and make sure everything's okay after scaling it up. In Fabric, how do we scale? We just buy another SKU. We just buy the bigger SKU, right? So we just upscale to the next SKU. Going to the next one here, and we're going to talk about the individual components. Systems data engineering. Basically, it's sorry. Provides the ability to use SQL technologies across a stack of different ETL tools and stuff. And so we can look at the elements in our lakehouse as either a lakehouse data architecture. And again, these are residing on the one lake, and we can use T-SQL to look at that. We can open these in Fabric notebooks, right? So we can use Spark language to look at that. We can bring in Python to manipulate that stuff, and in the Spark notebooks that are embedded into this lakehouse style architecture has just a huge, enormous plethora of different tools we can attach to Python, right? And we do PyPlot in there, for instance, right? And so we can attach a bunch of different, freeware, openware tool sets that allow us to manipulate it. So it's not just what's defined by Microsoft, it's what you need to bring into the tool set to manipulate it and look at it. And again, just kind of what does it look like in a lake house? And then we'll go in and we'll look into the Synapse Data Science and what that looks like for the users. And one of the cool things about that is now, because we have Spark notebooks and ability to do stuff, we can you used to have to add a data wrangler to this, but now we got data wrangler built in, right? So we define a notebook and we define the jobs to say, okay, now toggle the data wrangler on here. This allows me to look at a data set, and it gives me the ability to, for each of the columns, look at the column quality of there, right? And then see, do I have any missing records? Where is the deviations between one set of data and the other? And then now I'm looking at that data in that Python notebook. I can manipulate that data and drop rows or drop columns or change values. And then Data Wrangler allows me to see that data set as I'm iterating through these translation steps, rather than do some kind of translation and then see what happens after. So I get a full view of my data set, and then I can see the results as I'm applying individual steps, and then back those out if it's not what I want. So Data Wrangler is a really cool add-on to the Microsoft Fabric. Now we'll go into Synapse data warehousing. So SQL data warehouses, right? And then that allows me to build a warehouse that's implementing the SQL, where I can interface with it through standard SQL. And I see my tables and I see my views and define those views. And again, if you're familiar with SQL Server Management Studio, like on-premise, you're running it on your laptop, SQL Server Management Studio can talk to this directly. SQL Studio Management Studio can also talk to those elements in the Lakehouse data lake, either through, that's also through SQL. So I can look at all those data sets and table spaces directly through SQL Server Management Studio if I want, and manipulate those. And then now we're looking at visual queries. I can do visual queries against the SQL data warehouse as well. So now I can run Power Query here on these tables live, and then manipulate them to come out with some merged data set on there. And then I can orchestrate this if I want to, so that as they change and as those come into the data sets, I can have a pipeline that implements these Power Query translations so that I have a final set. So again, we're syncing, we define the rules of where our data comes into, and we're depositing into some kind of data store. Basically, the data store is one lake, but how we implement and how we manage it and how we interface with it could be a SQL data warehouse, or it could be a lakehouse architecture that looks and feels like a regular database also, but gives us some different tool sets to use. So either way, we can then use all these different tool sets or not, and it's up to you to choose. Just some stuff where I'm doing, I'm on a data set here, SQL warehouse, and I'm just doing, standard T-SQL, right? And it's just standard T-SQL. Everyone's familiar with that. The other standard language way to do that is through Spark notebooks. If you don't know Spark notebooks, but you use T-SQL, that's fine. And a lot of people, the data analysts, are a little more Spark notebook heavy. The traditional database administrators are more T-SQL familiar, right? SQL. So it gives them ability to work with that. And we can also view the relationships of the tables inside the Fabric data warehouse, right? So we're able to look at our table space, but we're also able to look at the relations of the tables and how the tables relate to each other, whether one-to-one, one-to-many, etc. And so we can see that view and modify that view directly in the Fabric stack. And then we can look into Synapse data warehouses. So I see all my flows of how something comes in, where it goes to, and then how it, like what's the final result? The final result of one flow may be a data set. The final result of another report is an actual report, Power BI style report. And we're about halfway through, so we got another 20 minutes maybe to go, maybe less. I can spin this up faster if we want. And we'll go into the real-time analytics. So we're getting close to the end on this, and the rest will actually go a little bit faster. So real-time analytics, we have a bunch of data sets that are on and coming from all different types of places, right? It could be IoT sensors on a factory floor. It could be, sensors from a fleet of trucks that have temperature and humidity sensors because they're delivering produce or frozen goods of some kind. And those are all really sensitive to for transportation point of view, because if the temperatures deviate from the accepted norm, we could have spoilage on the products, right? Or if a factory has some motors where they're pulling too many amps, or they're making soup and the temperature's too high, or the water level, the water pH level is out of bounds of what's acceptable according to the FDA, we got to throw those batches out. These are all things that I've worked with our customers on looking at, so I can recite them fairly quickly. So essentially, we can have, like I said, all the different types of data sources. In this case, SQLs could be coming from SQL, Cosmos DB, Azure Databricks, IoT, Internet of Things, all kinds of data sets that we can feed it into. And we have now an event stream and a real-time data warehouse that we can leverage to store all these, right? And we can put them into the event house, and then we can do the act job, the reflex job, which is the data activator that I mentioned before, one of the new things that is part of this whole stack. So I'm streaming all these data sets in. I'm looking for stuff in near real time to look for any changes or deltas and stuff. And then on the act jobs that I can call the reflex jobs, which is data activator, notify me if the the truck that's delivering ice cream on this route X, if the temperature gets above 32 degrees or whatever, my default values, let someone know, let management know, let the driver know. If it's getting close to it, let people know so that we don't have a problem. All of these things allow us to watch the data coming in, call off to Azure, call off to Power Platform, Power Apps, Power Automate, to send emails, to send text messages, to send Teams messages. All of these things are possible. So we're actively watching our data sets in real time, and we're defining jobs to notify people without looking at the dashboard, notify people, hey, there's a problem. So we don't have to have people monitoring the dashboard. We let the dashboards notify them of some change that's critical, whatever that may be that we define based on our business rules. And then we'll go into Power BI real quick. As many may know, Power BI has been the leader in the BI business intelligence space for 16 years. Well, I guess it's 17 now. This is kind of dated, 18. Click, Tableau, a couple of the others on there. And so we do a lot of discussions with end customers where they're looking at Click or they're looking at Tableau and they want to know, like, what's the difference? Before Fabric, so I've been doing this for a little while. Before Fabric, the biggest difference was specifically we most of the time we were having people asking me about Tableau versus Power BI. And then Tableau, very good product, a lot of things that it can do in there that aren't necessarily were available in Power BI. But the pricing, the entry level pricing was at the time about 4 times as much as the entry level pricing for Power BI. But that's changed a lot. That changed a lot specifically because now we have Fabric, right? And so now not only do we have the Power BI encapsulated into the Fabric stack, we have all these other tool sets that if you're running Tableau or Click or these other ones that TIBCO, you would have to, bring in all those things. And so now we're back to that big mess dashboard display I showed at the beginning when Microsoft explained why they're going to Fabric, because there's so many different choices, right? So someone wants to do a data lake and do, data warehousing and have it access a data lake and then have the ability to run notebooks across it, but also interface with SQL, one or the other or both. End customers looking at these other tools would have to be forced to look at other providers and wire all those up individually together, right? Fabric, single stack, all integrated together. If you're just a Microsoft shop, it's great. Even if you're not just a Microsoft shop, we've got people pulling in data from Google. They're mirroring AWS S2 storage buckets in there. We can connect to all kinds of data sets. And so mostly all we know is where is the data? Let's bring it into Fabric and then let's manipulate it and push it off and tell it what it, have it tell us what we want to know, right? Power BI dashboards, Click dashboards, Tableau dashboards. Everyone's seen Power BI business intelligence reports, etc. So let me look at, Power BI also had data flows, right? So we can do Power Query in Power BI. We can do data flows, all standard stuff. But now we have these tool sets available in the Fabric as well, which is, really nice. And plus the other tool stuff that aren't native to Power BI have the ability to do that. Just some few dashboards on different stuff that I've collected over time. This is a suit manufacturer. They've got multiple shifts and they're doing notifications of that. And then they're doing and again, here's the ones where they're looking at the water feeding into a batch of hominy they're cooking up. Chlorine's important to them. The pH level is important to them, and the water temperature. All that stuff is important when you're making soup. And so they're able to look at those individually and let people on the line be notified if things are getting to close to possibly a problem and not wait and have to throw a huge batch of 1,000 gallons of soup out, which is, kind of expensive for them. Okay. So we covered data. Yes.
Hi, Mike, it's Tony.
Hey, Tony.
Hi. Could we take a pause there? You have a question
Okay.
in the chat. They're asking, is the goal of the session to just talk about the different components of Fabric? I was under the impression this session would be about how we position Fabric for a CSP. Do you want to address that, or?
Yeah, we're going to get to that next. Hang on.
Okay.
I can address it. So we'll skip past that. So we'll go to it. Skip to some of that stuff. And we'll talk about just some new services. So I come down into the second half. So I wanted to kind of convey all the tool sets and let for positioning. It's important for someone selling that to know all the capabilities, right? And so this is what I want to do is have enough of this sink in to say, we can do all kinds of crazy stuff with this. It's got this full capability of stack that I can do with it. And if you want to do this way or that way, then yes, Fabric has that. And so I guess what we're doing is laying the foundation of a base understanding of Fabric. And then we go, how do we position it, right? And where do we start with? And we'll probably start with pricing. And then so we're looking at the old school Power BI pricing stuff is comparative to the different SKUs in Fabric. So we're not seeing a huge pricing delta on that. But where we position it is anyone that has a problem with looking, manipulating and collecting data from numerous data sources, right? So I have data here and I have data here. Maybe I've done an acquisition or 5 different acquisitions. So I have different systems across 5 different sub entities, but I want an encompassing view of the profit and loss for all of these, right? So how do I bring all that together? Well, I can go to each individual entity and generate the reports from the data and the systems they use. Maybe it's 5 different CRM tools and 5 different data warehouse tools and some whatever those systems are. They could be on 5 different entities that you own as a conglomerate. It could be 5 different types of applications in each place, and I got to bring those together. And sometimes people look at those individually and just run the numbers, and then they like take all that and they put that in Excel or they put it in something else. So with Fabric, we can reach out to all of those and bring all the data across all the different places in your environment or multiple environments to provide us some results that are cohesive, right? A single set of results based on all the different sets of data that we want to know about. And again, real world situations where, I've worked with, and Tony has too, companies where they have these different entities are systems that aren't necessarily natively able to talk to each other and merge, or the data formats are in different styles, right? So we can bring all those into Fabric and provide a unique view of the entire system, whatever that encompasses, right? And then so what we would do if someone's having that kind of problem with getting their data collected and figuring out how am I going to bring all that data in, how am I going to present that so I can get sales versus profit versus loss or whatever they're looking for. How do we get that, right? And so and what does that cost? And so I have a cost on here. We can start at $262 a month, reservation yearly commit 150, or we can go up from there. And the beautiful thing is Fabric also has the ability to do a trial, right? So we can start with a Microsoft trial on Fabric, and this Microsoft will ingest this into the customer. You don't have to be a CSP tenant or space. You just need a Microsoft tenant ID. And then you can get the Fabric trial, and that's 60 days. So that allows I'm an MSP or a reseller. I can have my customer spin up a Fabric trial, but we want to just say, oh, don't use a Fabric trial. We want to be able to tell them, I have lake houses in here. I can run a SQL data warehouse in here. If I want to, I can run a lake house architecture and interface with it via notebooks or interface with it via SQL. And if you want to manipulate it from an on-premise SQL Server Management Studio, you can do that too. So we want them to make them understand there's multiple things that we have available that they can do in there. And it has the reporting, it has the lakehouse architecture, it has the security things in there. And you know what, Mr. Customer or Mrs. Customer, the best thing we can do is point you to the Fabric trial. When you get the Fabric trial, Microsoft will inject a full F64 license of Fabric into your tenant space, and you've got 60 days and potentially an extension on that, because Microsoft's doing extensions on that, to start working on this with no cost. So this has been from customers coming to us, the Fabric trial has been huge. For the customers that were on Power BI, the calls we have with them are a little bit different because they're already ingesting data and creating dashboards and reports at a larger scale level. but now they're asking us questions in detail about SQL data warehouse, are working with notebooks, right? Or how does that one lake work? Because we didn't have one lake in the Power BI space, even at the premium subscription level. So we're answering questions on that. But for any of your customers that are looking at a way to bring all their data sets in and make it all make sense at the end result for what management's looking for, or what operators are looking for, you know, service operators or reports. We explained kind of at a high level the different tool sets that are available and bundled into Fabric. And then we say, okay, well, you know, let's make sure you understand those at a basic level. And now here's this free trial. And then we walk them through getting that trial going, right? And we walk them through or put them in touch with other people that can help explain the individual pieces to them that they may or may not be familiar with. So the SQL stuff in here, fairly straightforward. The notebooks, not so much. The data activators, kind of new, but it's streaming data sets. And now we've got tool sets we can add onto streaming data sets. So a lot of people are familiar with streaming data sets and pushing those into a Power BI dashboard. But now we have this capability with those to actually do notifications. And Tony, we had another thing I think show up in the chat if you want to hit that. So that's what I'd say. This is how you position is figure out, you know, like, well, if they have a lot of data from a bunch of different systems and they're having trouble manipulating them, we have AI tools. We have AI tools in this stuff. So all we got to do basically to get started is make a connection to the data sets from Fabric. You do a simple pull of get data. Now the data, whether it's one set of data or 12 different sets of data or 100 different sets of data that I want to bring in, we do it all in, it comes in, and then now we start wiring it together so that we come out at the end with multiple different data sets or reports that show us different views onto our systems that provide us with KPIs, management insights, all that stuff. And we have the ability to, from that managed data set that comes out as a result of parsing and manipulating and merging all these data sets, we also have the ability to, on the back end, besides just reports in the data activator, we can also run agentic tools on the backside of that too. So now we can talk to our data through like a ChatGPT interface. There's still some stuff being wired up on that, and some tenants don't have that yet. But Microsoft's announced it. So now I can like pipe in AI tools in, and so I can talk to my data through like a ChatGPT or a Microsoft Copilot interface, so I can, you know, wire it to Gemini from Google if I want. So this is fundamental. Fabric allows those kind of capabilities, and even the AI picture aside, it allows an organization to, you know, structure their data from whatever data sets they have, put it all in one place and analyze it, right? And you get a free trial on that. And I'd also, if you're pitching this, we're going to give them a trial. You're going to talk to them, you know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes on the phone, and just say, you know, it's got all this stuff up, right? You bring up the Microsoft Fabric homepage, and then you see some of those charts, like I showed you, like here's all the key elements that Fabric has, and hopefully you can tell them, well, you know, it's got SQL data warehouses, it's got a lakehouse architecture, it's got purview, so we can define the roles on these different things, so to make sure that data doesn't go to people that shouldn't have to see it. But I'd also, and like Tony and I both encourage the partners to, as they're going through that exploration of Fabric under that free trial, also start doing some learning path. And the cheapest learning path is Microsoft Learn site, you know, on Fabric, right? And then they can search for the particular things they want. They don't have to necessarily follow the whole course. They can search for the particular things they want on that. And then they'll also learn administration on that. So I was kind of gotten some administration on that. You know, how we can look at this stuff, how we can govern it, right? So we can look at the admin portal. When the customer's on a trial, we always want them to install the Microsoft Fabric Capacity Metrics app. This tells them how much the capacity unit they're running, right? They're utilizing. So you've got a customer on trial for Fabric. they're going to have an F64. They're going to be loading some data sets and running some lake houses and some SQL query jobs, and all those kinds of things are going to pull down from the capacity unit, which is a combination of memory and CPU, and that's up here in the top. And so with the F64, we can look at the numbers to see how close they are to approaching that or going over that. And then we can then transition to the conversation of, okay, the trial's ending. What size, and we want to know what size should they deploy of a fabric SKU, and this will help us determine what size we should deploy on that. And then, of course, the data governance with Microsoft Purview. I have a dashboard on that. And so we can see all the stuff that are listed in the workspaces and all the stuff that's tagged in all the elements of Fabric that have security, data loss prevention, rules applied to them, right? And so if certain data sets that are very highly secure and they're not tagged, we're going to see that in the dashboard. So Tony, do we have any more questions? We do have.
Oh, no, but Kayla did make a comment about both you and I are available for technical sessions where we could talk about your customers' specific requirements and, more on a one-on-one basis. So just a comment there, organizations, big or small, are dealing with data growth. So ultimately here, what we're trying to do is get from the data to making decisions to taking actions. And the nice thing about all these integrated workloads that Fabric offers allows your customers to get to that ultimate goal a lot quicker because everything's integrated and you don't have to worry about all those interconnections with all those various systems. So, in order to get to that point, each customer is going to have very specific requirements on what they want to do with their data, and so that it meets their business workflows. So Mike and I can get on one-on-one conversations with you and your customers to help you get there.
Yeah, and FYI, Tony's East Coast, I'm West Coast, so we've got quite a wide time availability on that. And I was talking to the Channel Pro team beforehand. There, likely a number of people on here are not TD SYNNEX customers. So if you're working with a different CSP, maybe you're at one of the different CSPs, I would hope they might have someone that could also provide some guidance on that. And if not, yeah, hey, we welcome the opportunity to talk to you and I understand the original question posted about well, how do we position it and stuff. Tony and I have been doing this with the Fabric and Power BI and stuff before. We just get a lot of questions where our MSPs and resellers across the US and Canada come to us and say, I got no idea how to work with this. I know M365 licensing. I've got a bunch of stuff on Azure. I know how to do virtual machines, but this is different, right? And it is different because it's a very complex, not a very integrated stack of a bunch of different tools, right? And so we need a way to work with our customers to explain them. And this is the kind of thing where it helps at first for the first few calls to get someone like Tony or I on the call to talk directly with your customer live. And we do that all the time because we understand that it's a new tool. It's been a year and a half, and we understand a lot of customers don't have that. We have people that resellers of ours that have customers that have already gone through the whole trial process, and they just want to purchase it because they're having to, they're in a CSP channel already, and so they have to go to their reseller and they just want to buy the Fabric. And then we have these resellers call us and say, well, what is this Fabric? Because we haven't had that. And then how do we handle that? And it's like, okay, well, we basically do the similar to this. kind of thing is like we explain at a high level the different elements of fabric and kind of what you can do. We're not expecting you to like pass a certification test, but we want you to have at least an understanding of all the sort of pillars in fabric, as you, if you would, and kind of what they do. So when you talk to the customers, you can say, well, maybe they're providing you some kind of like clues to what they would need. And then you could say, oh yeah, fabric probably has that. Let's have a call with someone I know. And then you would call out to someone on TD Synnex or whoever, and then have a call with the customer, right? So we're not asking you to like have to know all that stuff. We're saying is that knowledge will come and you'll naturally acquire more knowledge as you're working with these kind of opportunities. And
Mike, yeah, we have Michael Siggins who'd like to ask
yes,
a question.
Hey, Tony, thank you very much. Yeah, Mike, great stuff. Another just a couple of questions if we have time for it is, are your customers coming to you with ways to help them address challenges they face in managing and securing data across different departments or locations?
yeah, all the time. So, and we have a bunch of stuff. Both Tony and I are Microsoft Azure Power Platform, Fabric tool space area. That's where we work in, right? So we can address those things from Microsoft point of view. And so Fabric is a back end set of where the data comes from, right? So we have operational data sets. And now in Fabric, we can do an operational data set with Azure SQL. But so they're coming from different stuff. And so we secure those endpoints and already these customers have those secured. But when we bring that data in from all these different locations and different systems, we want that data to maintain the same level of security, if not more, than the individual sets of data on the different systems, because now it's all of it, right? It's basically from a data point of view, when you bring it all into Fabric, that's the keys to the kingdom, right? And so we want to make sure that across that, we're very restrictive of who can see these data sets and who can exfiltrate them if you want them to do that. Purview would take care of preventing that, or make sure it just stays in there, right? And make sure that we can then now look at all that without putting load on the operational database. That's what we bring. That's historically why we brought stuff in to a business intelligence, SQL data warehouse, lakehouse architectures, all these other things with all these other vendors. We need to massage and work on that data. And we don't do that against the operational machine because it's going to add load on it. And also it's going to, so it's going to hit performance on it. And also we just want to get the data and work on it off to the side. And so,
And if I could just add to that, Mike, if you will.
yeah,
So, Mike, to just expand on that, a lot of times we have customers who have what I would term organizational reports that applies to most users, but then you'll have certain reports that are geared towards different departments within that organization. So by using the tool like Purview and doing some data classification, once that data is classified, then those data sets that Mike's talking about would be specific to those different departments and reports. So again, organizational reports may be pushed out to most employees, whereas those departmental ones may also have restrictions where you need certain permissions or have the required permissions to be able to use those reports.
Well, it looks like we go up against the top of the hour here. We covered a lot today. Mike or Tony, any kind of parting advice for us today, folks to take away with them?
yeah, if you have an opportunity, follow those basic steps is kind of like, again, if you identify that this may possibly fit what the customer wants, and that's what I tried to cover is some of the key elements that they may be asking you about. I need a data warehouse, I need to do this, I need to do that. And then like maybe you saw some of that and you say, oh yeah, you should look at Fabric. And by the way, Microsoft will give you a free 60-day trial. And then we can probably get someone, if you've got a relationship with TD Synnex. If you don't, we can always make one. Then we can bring someone else in to talk to you directly about what the next steps are to make sure that the customer is successful. So walk away with that. We can get 60 days free. We can have them experiment. We can guide them on that path, and we can make sure they're successful. And then that's going to, hopefully increase your sales at that level.
Yeah, I'll just expand on that. I think the 60-day trial sometimes is a good opportunity to do like a small POC just to ensure that it'll meet the organizational needs. In my experience, though, that 60-day trial is a necessity just to make those confirmations. And I've had customers use it as a POC, a proof of concept.
All right. Well, Mike and Tony, thank you very, very much for your time today. I want to thank our audience for being here and TD Synnex making this all possible. A lot of great stuff going on. I mean, it's really moving so quickly. Really appreciate you guys digging deep into it today. For our attendees today, we will be following up tomorrow with a link to the recording and with some additional information. This is Michael Siggins from Channel Pro. I want to thank you all for being here today, and we're done. So take care, everybody. Have a great day now. Bye-bye.